So, if I mention Great Zimbabwe and Mapungubwe, what conjures up in your mind, Keith?
Old, sophisticated city, really, I suppose, in South Africa.
And actually,
I'm not sure quite how old it is, but it's very old.
Do you know, I'm just going to correct you on one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in South Africa, but it's in South Africa. Basically, when people refer to South Africa, it's obviously the country, but then people refer to South Africa as being the lower part of Africa. And it is, in fact, in the lower part of Africa, so it is, in effect, in South Africa. But it is, in fact, in Zimbabwe. So you've got everything right there, so that's good. And if I mention this to you, Sue, is that the same thing that conjures up in your mind?
No, because I'm really got a big blank about this, so I haven't got any sort of input.
Right. Can I be completely unfair and unjustified in asking you the following question? Is it true to say that there were no great civilizations other than Egypt in Africa?
Oh, I'm sure that there were a lot of great civilizations.
Right answer. Pam?
I don't know anything about Zimbabwe except for what I've heard in the news. And I think it was young girls being captured, wasn't it, in Zimbabwe?
Oh, okay.
That was about all, really.
Oh, okay. A young girl being captured in Zimbabwe.
No, lots of them.
Yeah,
actually...
the Boko Haram.
Yeah, I thought Boko Haram was actually in somewhere like Angola or somewhere.
I thought it was in Nigeria.
Mali, isn't it?
Oh my God, we've got so many countries going in here. Right, okay.
It's all across Africa, isn't it?
Said anything.
Okay, let's just stop that.
No,
now.
I don't know anything much.
Oh, okay. Right, now I'm going to look a little bit at Mapungubwe at the end, but we're going to look at Great Zimbabwe first. On Monday, Tuesday, the question was being asked why I was doing Great Zimbabwe first and why I was doing Mapungubwe second. Mapungubwe, the culture associated with Mapungubwe, actually in South Africa, the country, came before Great Zimbabwe. But one thing that we do know is that both of the cultures at Mapungubwe in South Africa and Great Zimbabwe in Zimbabwe is that the people from Mapungubwe simply migrated to where Great Zimbabwe ended up as, and then the people of Great Zimbabwe moved further north. Now, this is a rather different lecture than the other lectures that we've been undertaking. And the reason why it's a different lecture from the other lectures that we've been undertaking, we know what happened to the people of Mapungubwe. They went to Great Zimbabwe, and we know what happened to the people of Great Zimbabwe. They moved further north. So that's really helpful. But there are some key similarities between Great Zimbabwe as a people and as a civilization when you compare it with the Amazonian people, and then when you compare it with the likes of the people at Petra and the Nabateans. And the great similarity is the equation 1 minus 2 equals 1. And what we're talking about is we're talking about the people within this African domain that we're talking about. Started off in those wonderful, humble roundhouses, nice little communities, living and breathing off the environment, being really self-supporting. Very much that we see with the Amazonian, very much that we see with the Bedouins. Moving to high culture, with the sense of building towns and building villages out of stone, permanence, and then moving back to what they had been before. 1 minus 2 equals 1. So that's a nice formula. And when we think about Mapungubwe and we think about the likes of Great Zimbabwe, these sites have been archaeologically excavated. And the first time I came to be aware of Great Zimbabwe was probably in a history class in school. When I was doing GCSE, oh God, 30 years ago, And I would like to say that I've got some feedback from one of your mics. So I think it's you, Pam. So if you can if you can mute your mic, I'll be really appreciative of that. I'm just getting a bit of feedback. Sorry, Pam. The first time it came to my notice in regards to Great Zimbabwe was that it was.
Can you cut it for me? I can't find the thing.
I can do that. I can do that. There's not a problem.
Thank you.
So
it's because your screen is big, or mine is.
Hang on, don't talk about size. There was a sizes thing there, wasn't there, Keith?
Size is not in everything, you know that.
Right, back to my point. I will get to the point before Goth says get on with it.
Get on with it.
I first got to know about Great Zimbabwe because it was mentioned in a history class. And a history teacher basically said 30 years ago, he said that a chap by the name of Cecil Rhodes had been using Great Zimbabwe as a gold mine. And I thought, I didn't think anything of it. Why would that be relevant? But the archaeology at Great Zimbabwe and Mapungubwe and all the other cultures around, there are lots of places like Mapungubwe and Great Zimbabwe, lots of towns, lots of villages made of stone. These places were being used as mines because they were very rich in gold. And then years later, when I actually came to know about these localities, it was as part of my university degree with the University of Leicester. And basically, it was very much about Cecil Rhodes. It was very much about what people felt about Mapungubwe and Great Zimbabwe in the 1930s, 1970s, 1980s. And it was always derogatory, except for an archaeologist known as Gertrude Caton-Thompson, who excavated and come to know the likes of Great Zimbabwe in 1928. And Gertrude Thompson was the first one to make the brash statement that native peoples may have created the site of Great Zimbabwe. And from that moment onwards, she was derided. You know, the idea that these ignorant savages that roamed the landscape of Zimbabwe and South Africa could have ever created anything like this was an anathema. There's no way they could have ever been able to do it. This is the idea and the words of colonialism. These are the great words of racism. And Gertrude, being a woman, what she had to say had to be dismissed. The male archaeologists, even in the 1980s, even in the 1990s, were saying that Great Zimbabwe itself and all the other small communities and towns within that landscape were actually created by the Portuguese or people from the north. So the rhetoric was quite scathing against those that believed that there could have been civilizations within South Africa. And I'm not talking about the country, within South Africa in the past. So I've started off with this little sort of map of excavations of the summit of Mapungubwe to actually make this statement that archaeological work has been undertaken there from the 1920s, from the 1930s onwards. So we've got scientific bearing on what's there, indicating in this little plan associated with Mapungubwe. We'll show exactly where these places are before Ellen asks. These sort of stone circles associated with the bases of roundhouses, ceremonial locations, and so on. But what I'd like to do is show you this. Now, this is what the likes of Cecil Rhodes was after in the 1890s. Cecil Rhodes was responsible for creating the British South African Company, and it was the British South African Company of Mining. Cecil Rhodes believed that there should be a strip of red all the way from Joburg all the way through to Cairo, and that eventually was achieved. But one of the things he was interested in was profit. Slavery was not the thing. Slavery had been abolished in the British world since 1807. and in the colonies a little bit later. But you couldn't sort of extract slaves. So what you had to do was extract minerals, diamonds, various precious metals, and in fact, gold itself. These are some of the artifacts excavated at Mapungubwe. And actually, I'm proud to say that when I was editor of Archaeology World Report, we actually showed that rhinoceros in the left-hand corner on the front of the magazine. And also the other thing as well is we actually had one of my prodigies, who's actually a daughter of Anne from Bridgend. Her daughter Mary went to the excavations at Mapungubwe, so I had actually a direct link with what was going on there back in the day. It was great because I wasn't just showing images. I was just having people telling us about the archaeology. It wasn't just in books. So we'll come on to these golden artifacts: golden bowls, a golden rhinoceros, a golden crocodile. This is some kind of ceremonial piece. All these were sort of embossed on a wooden frame, as it were. It was carved in wood, and obviously what happened, they got golden nuggets and they hammered them, and then they hammered them onto the wooden object underneath. So this is why these little holes in them. And yes, a bowl with holes in. That's because it was hammered onto a wooden bowl. But they were in the Iron Age, so they did have the smelting processes to do this, but that was the way things were. So the other thing about I want to do Mapungubwe second is because the archaeological ruins at Mapungubwe are not as great as the ones at Great Zimbabwe, because Mapungubwe came first. I want to look at the monumental buildings at Great Zimbabwe first. And the buildings at Great Zimbabwe were abandoned in the year 1450. And the site of Mapungubwe was abandoned in 1250. If anyone's writing this down, it might be very, very useful for you. So what we're talking about is across this entire landscape, there are civilizations that are still to be discovered. Civilizations like those that are being discovered, associated with the Amazon basin, and so on. New archaeology, but contradicting myself, Great Zimbabwe is not new archaeology. It's how it's seen is actually new. We now understand that Great Zimbabwe was built by a very, very advanced culture associated with the Shona people today. And like the people of the Amazon basin, the Shona people decided to go back to the way they had been before. It's not saying that living in round houses, living off the land is basic. It's just the way they wanted to be. And that's not to be derogatory. Civilization meets civilization in different forms. It's when you start to eat people that you're not civilized. So that's probably the only differentiation. What we talk about with movements of people throughout Africa is that when we look at the San people associated with the lower half of South Africa, the country, what's happening is there's a migration of peoples further north, not from the north-south, but the people from south to the north, which put things on the head if you think about the likes of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba and so on. So we're talking about movements of people all the way across to the likes of Mapungubwe. And then we're talking about peoples from Mapungubwe, then moving to Great Zimbabwe, and then moving further north. And this is all associated with trade winds. Goff will know all about trade winds. Trade winds from the likes of India and the Persian Gulf. So as the conditions change, the trade winds start to go less and less further south, and trade starts to go further up to the Swahili coastline. And what's happening is movements of people and their profit continually moves further and further north. And we will see that. So I'm going to make the unusual step of really annoying Kathy, right? Other than the face mask issue, which I will need to have a chat with them in the break. The thing that really annoys Kathy is that I show an article on the screen and I read through it. But on this occasion, I am going to do that partially in regards to the site of Great Zimbabwe, simply because I couldn't have done any better in writing it. But there's some beautiful images on this article as well. That's why I want to show you it on the screen. So that is the great enclosure at Great Zimbabwe. That great enclosure at Great Zimbabwe had walls towering 12 meters in height. And there is one key important detail that you need to know. It's all made of dry stone. Now, this structure was constructed sometime around the 1300s, up to about 1350. By 1450, the site had been abandoned. Why? I was told to remind people that in history, we've got movements of people. And one of the great parallels to this is that when we look at the Roman world, when the Roman world collapses in Britain, particularly with its shore forts on the eastern coast, which I may say Kathy's been with me to see some of the eastern shore forts in Anglia. You look at these eastern shore forts and they're massive, massive walls, not as high as these, but massive walls, all made with mortar. And these sites are just abandoned. They're just abandoned. There are people living within the landscape, but the walls are just abandoned. Richborough Roman fort, abandoned. We're talking about all these wonderful sites just abandoned. They might be reoccupied in the Norman period, but for a long period of time, they're just abandoned. All the fixtures and fittings are just left. And the archaeologists have always wondered why they were never reoccupied. And the answer is they weren't reoccupied. It's because people didn't want to live there. Vis-a-vis, that was the answer. People were suspicious of those walls. They didn't live there. And the other thing that can be said about Great Zimbabwe is that when we equate this to the people of the Amazon basin, we see with the people of the Amazon basin moving from one city, abandoning it to another, abandoning it to another. And we saw that last week quite clearly. And you don't have to have a reason to have a rich society like Petra and just abandon it. You don't need to have a reason. I've known people that have had homes and they've just abandoned them with everything in them. And you're thinking, why did you do that? Because I wanted to. I just wanted to leave everything behind. I'm not going to pry, but there are probably people amongst us today that may have been in a really bad relationship. We thought, right, sod that. We leave everything there and we go elsewhere, right? And we just leave everything behind. I'm one of those that's been in that situation. We leave everything behind. It's the same as what's happening with the Great Zimbabweans. You don't need a reason to have high society and to move elsewhere. So we're not really going to look at that picture, but what we are going to do is we're going to look at the greatness of these people and what they achieved. And that's not going to take away anything from the people of Zimbabwe today. The people of Zimbabwe are great innovators. They're great thinkers. They've got great ways of moving into different spheres of industry and commerce and so on. And this is what they were like in the past as well. When we look at one or two images, this is going to blow your mind. And I'm going to ask Keith or Sue if a certain image in a short while is blowing your mind, because it certainly blew my mind. Around Great Zimbabwe, the main enclosure, before anyone shouts out what Zimbabwe means, it means stone builders or stone houses. This is what Zimbabwe means. Zimbabwe, they base who they are on their past, which is really important. And they love their past. They're connected with their past, which is really important. When people come along to my lectures on a Wednesday evening, they will always hear me saying, look what we once had. As an independent Cymru with our princes and all the rest of it, we were capable of building castles. The Normans didn't first build castles here. We were capable of doing all these wonderful things, but we're not connected with our past in Wales. We've forgotten it. But the people of Zimbabwe haven't forgotten their past, and they love it. They're proud of it. And what you can see in front is actually the leaders living alongside their people. And their people had miniature enclosures like the big enclosure. Why the walls were so high is anyone's guess. Now, a couple of people shouted at me on Tuesday. They said, we don't like this reconstruction. And I actually agreed with them. I said, okay, I know you don't like this reconstruction, but there's something about this reconstruction that I wanted to bring to you. And what's important about this reconstruction is several fold. Now, you've got, if I can move in there with my little cursor, you've got the decoration there. You've got the wonderful level of decoration, which doesn't need to be, you don't need to put that in there, right? But they did. And it's geometrically sound, everything's sound. This is of great interest. It's a solid stone tower. It's solid. It's a solid spherical tower. It's not completely spherical, but it's battered going inwards. But the wall isn't battered. The wall is actually vertical. And this is within a landscape that still has earth tremors, and this wall is still standing after 700 years. So if anyone's ever critical of our brothers in South Africa, they can think again, because they were capable of building civilization when we had to use mortar in the West. That's the comparison. And then somebody said, how do we know these things are on top? Okay, we actually dismissed these were actually of any authenticity at all. But the way they're building this with really nice dressed stones, and somebody, can you all bear with me a minute? I've got somebody at the door. I'm so frustrated. Hang on a minute. Back to where I was. And one thing that we can clearly see here as well is that we have these roundhouses within these huts, but within these stone walls. Some of these had stone bases on them as well, but they're still roundhouses, probably due to temperature constraints within this semi-arid landscape, but there are lots of trees around as well. That's the point I was making just before I was interrupted. These stones themselves, you would be excused for thinking that these would be happily at home on Hadrian's Wall. So they're dressing these stones. These are within an Iron Age culture, which is actually the wrong word to use, but this is what my notes say. These are in an Iron Age culture. These are people using iron, and there's that sense of being connected with using iron to hone these stones, to dress these stones in this perfect structure. And I'm probably going to be wrong in thinking, but I'm pretty sure that the likes of Goth may have been to this site. Now this is a nice entranceway. The Great Enclosure at Great Zimbabwe is not the only site like this. There are dozens and dozens of them, but it's the best of all the rest. This is what I wanted to show it. And this is actually a typical entranceway. And I'm going to write the word lintel down for a reason. They didn't use lintels because they didn't want to, or they didn't need to. The point to be made there is that when Western archaeologists first started working on these sites, what they did in their reconstructions was to insert lintels, which structurally destabilized the structures. And the local people were saying, we didn't use lintels. And the Western archaeologists would say, what would you know? These sites were constructed by us in the West. We're using lintels. So you can get the sense of us and them. Western archaeologists did not understand these sites, but Gertrude Caton-Thompson did, a female archaeologist that went with a group of female archaeologists to the site. She was very much into having a female excavation, and it had a female perspective, because the female archaeologists saw the culture differently than those macho Western archaeologists who always saw culture in a military sense. What I would like to do is I'd like to go directly to this article, but we're going to zoom in on this. I showed this to my young explorers yesterday. And when I showed this to my young explorers yesterday, one of them said, wow. And I thought, yeah, wow, look at all the walls. Look at the stuff that we do know about. And they created this. And spot the entranceway. Well, the way the sun is shining, there's another entrance. You can just see it perfectly aligned. There's a linear line running from the entranceway out. Or the exit, because there's another entrance there where there's actually a pathway leading to it. And there's another one there. There were lots of entrances and exits into this site. And it starts to make you wonder, was this defensive or was it for something else? And let's go with the something else. So that. And we're going to look at that. And we're going to look at where Great Zimbabwe is. But we will come back to these with a sense of understanding. And Sue, get ready for the big question.
Okay.
So what we're going to do, I want you to be honest with what I'm just about to show you. So we're looking at an article written by, again, a woman. Women being able to understand the archaeology better than men. So here we go. Let's get the factor. Top of the wall, stones inside, alongside that tower that you had a glimpse at, going down the vertical wall, keep going. There's the lady's head. And can I have a response?
A lady's head? I can't see a lady's head.
No, nor can I.
I'm not sharing the right screen.
We're seeing a wall and a tower.
Yeah, and a lot of dark shadow, and there's a tree.
Unfortunately, it's not shown. Let's do that again.
Okay.
Run this again, okay?
Okay.
This article is written by a Tish Farrell, whose name should be showing on the screen.
Yep, see that now.
Yeah, right on the edge. Yeah.
Right, Sue. Let's have the reaction. Top of the wall.
Right.
Stonework.
It's coming up slowly.
Okay.
It's still a very incomplete picture.
Right.
I can just.
All right.
It's jogging up slowly. Yeah.
Okay. Tower on the left, wall on the right.
Right. Yep. Now it's beginning to emerge.
Yeah. Now we got somebody's head.
Yeah. A head's just appeared.
Let's have your response.
Oh dear, must be Greek.
It doesn't look in Africa at all.
No, not what you'd expect, is it?
No.
Keep talking. I'm enjoying this. Go for it.
And also, it must be overwhelming to be inside, where you're in that very narrow place with these very tall walls either side of you. But she also looks as though she's just gone shopping.
And there's some nice flagstones there for Ellen.
Yeah. We've got Ellen's flagstones. She's got a bag to put.
Let's go back to sensibility. Come on, let's have a bit more response. Come on, are you both taken away by this wall?
Oh yeah. Given the circumstances that it's totally unexpected. It's, you know, as I'm sure the kids would have said, awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now,
Because now that you've scrolled down a bit, we're getting a sense of the height again, which was lost because it was you know, just
technology.
exposed so slowly.
Technology. There's lots of things that can be said about this. This is much taller than Hadrian's Wall would have ever been. This is taller than most of the height of the Great Wall of China. This is all being made of dry stone. And
So
this, there's no mortar at all in it at all. If we want to do the linear line, that's how straight the wall is.
Wow.
And actually, you know, the tower, you described it earlier on where we had the tower and we had the wall, and you said there was a shadow, right? Now that was with the other image that I thought you were actually looking at this one. That you could see a little bit of you could see it was tapering inwards, right? Even when you're alongside it and you look at this, the tapering inwards is only slight.
Right.
And you're looking within the gap between the tower and the wall. And this for me is wow. This is what I've had this week is wow. This looks absolutely amazing. And actually, I think you said, Keith, you weren't expecting to see this.
Yeah, correct.
So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about something that's absolutely amazing for me to show you. So inside the great enclosure of Great Zimbabwe, these magnificent walls have survived for nearly 7 centuries and not a lick of mortar to keep them standing. So what we then do is if we go down to that image, that's what we're talking about. So the space between that lady and the wall is what we're talking about here. And there's actually another vertical tower showing there as well. So you've got a vertical tower, a battered tower, and you've got a vertical wall, and you've got another vertical wall inside. Now, there is one thing that was pointed out several times, that on the top, you can't get to the top of this tower. It's just a tower. It's just a possibly ornamented tower. It's not for defense. You couldn't really look out from it because you would need a ladder that was about 14, 15 meters in height, which even by modern standards is a pretty bloody tall ladder, right? And I'm not saying they didn't have a tower, but a ladder, but I'm just saying if you want to have access to this tower, you're going to put steps on it. Somebody then, you're thinking about the perspective then, why have you got the tower? I had somebody say, right, okay, Carl. They said, why have you got the tower on Tuesday? They said, what's the point in this tower? And then I responded, what right have you got to ask whether there's a point in the tower? But then they said, you're not answering the question. And I said, okay, if you want me to answer the question, I'll give you an answer. If say, for example, you look at the Great Pyramids at Giza. When you think about the Great Pyramids at Giza, they were originally built to house burials, but they weren't accessible. There was no access inside the Great Pyramid. You weren't meant to go in. If you look at the tomb of Pakal at Palenque, you weren't meant to go in there because all the entranceway was blocked up. And you could think that this is this tower itself. This really tall tower is meters taller than the Brock at Mauser on the islands of Shetland, right? A huge tower that its height would have been about 15 meters in height, at its original height. Somebody then said, oh, why didn't we demolish the tower and find the burial underneath? And then I said, how dare you? Because the local people don't want you working out what's inside that tower. What right have we got to assume that we have a right to know what's in that tower? Maybe there's nothing in that tower. Why does there need to be anything in that tower? But the tower itself tells you of the culture. It tells you of their nature being able to create things and to be able to abandon them. This has parallels with Easter Island. In fact, when I said a few weeks ago about Easter Island, right? I said that the statues were erected at Easter Island because they were. And I had a few of you saying that's absolutely ridiculous. I know some of you were thinking that. And then, lo and behold, I watched a video on YouTube by an archaeologist from the University of College London. And guess what their conclusion was? The carvings were erected because they were erected for the sake of it. Nothing else was meant to be said about them. And not only did I feel completely vindicated, but I felt that there are other people thinking the same as me and that other woman. And then when you look at something like this, you can only marvel at this great civilization that once existed. Looking at the text there as well, no one knows exactly why this great city was abandoned. We've said that. We keep saying it. For some 350 years until around 1450. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep that up there. I'm going to read my notes here. 1450. Until 1450, Great Zimbabwe had been a flourishing merchant center that drew in from the surrounding country supplies of gold, copper, ivory, animal skins, and cotton. The city's entrepreneurs then traded these goods onto the Swahili cities of the north along the East African coast, otherwise known as Mozambique. You can read more about these on the internet and get an association with them. In return, the traders brought back luxury goods, jewelry, decorative pieces, such as Chinese Celadon dishes dating to the 1300s, goods from Persia, goods from India, gems, silverwork, and all these other wonderful things imported in. And these exported some of the richnesses of Africa. It could be said the richness of Africa is still to be uncovered. But I tell you of a danger. The likes of Mapungubwe and the likes of Great Zimbabwe are under the threat of mining. With the wealth that once existed and with the wealth that's still there, it's the decision to be made to either keep all these sites or to actually mine some of the areas where these sites are. Not the ruins, but what's under the surface. I think it's not our case to judge what the people of Zimbabwe do, but we have to judge the people of Zimbabwe and South Africa for how they display these sites. They love these sites, and it's their right to decide their future. But they see them as an important footprint to their past, as we see an important footprint to our past when we look at the likes of Stonehenge. Look at those facts and figures there. It says that the city ruins cover 80 hectares, 200 acres in area, which is a vast area. I've no idea how big Llantwit Major is, but if you think about the area of Llantwit Major, think about Great Zimbabwe. It's a large area. It's many stones enclosures commanding the southern slopes of Zimbabwe's high plateau watershed between the Zambezi and the Limpopo rivers. Now that's important. And what I'm about to say might be extremely arrogant. The people of Great Zimbabwe were intelligent enough to build their civilization above the zone of the deadly tsetse fly, that would inundate the valleys, but not on these upper areas where they could keep their populations and their cattle safe from the sleeping sickness that the tsetse fly brought them. And that isn't me being arrogant. I'm saying that's being practical. Let's compare this with European 1300s. Our towns in Britain, towns in Italy were rife with disease, were rife with waterborne diseases. But these people were more advanced in thinking about disease than we were. They were able to grow their populations. Moving from Mapungubwe in the south, they moved their population to this site of Great Zimbabwe on this great plateau. Their population moved from 5,000 people to 20,000 people at and around the Great Zimbabwe site itself. They were able to support great civilization just as the Bedouin had moved on to the Nabatean civilization of Petra itself. Though Great Zimbabwe was not a singular phenomenon, contemporary with it and across the high plateau region are the remains of at least 100 other Zimbabwe locations, houses of stone. Several were large enough to have been the capitals of rival states, or was this just one state occupying the same sense of well-being? I'm going to move this down to a silly image that I've not really used this week. This is a reconstruction of what this great enclosure looked like at Zimbabwe. I don't go with this because Peter Garlake's reconstruction of the great enclosure platform from Life at Great Zimbabwe, Mambo Press, 1982. I've got to try and work out what was going through the mind of Peter Lake when he undertook that reconstruction. I disagree that these were completely conical shaped towers because there's no real evidence of that. These things sticking on the walls around the outside, that doesn't seem to make sense either. But with this as a backdrop to what I'm just about to read, gold was the key commodity, and it is likely that it was Great Zimbabwe's successful cattle production that provided it with the trading power to secure gold supplies from mines some 15 miles away. So in other words, they traded their cattle with the gold miners, brought the gold onto the site, and then the gold moved to the Swahili coastline and then further on towards the east. The coastline is over 200 miles away, by the way. So it's not built along the coast. And you're thinking, oh my God, actually, people, I've actually just realized something. The greatness of actually Great Zimbabwe, right? It's just suddenly occurred to me. It's one of those moments in a lecture. When we look at great civilizations in the West today, we look at the likes of Rome. Rome can be quite easily flooded by the River Tiber. You look at Babylon itself, flooded by the Euphrates. You look at the likes of London can be flooded by the River Thames. You look at Paris as well. You look at all these great cities, they can be easily flooded. Because the reason why these great cities are there, you may argue, is because they want to trade with the world via the water waves. But the Great Zimbabweans did it differently. The people of Great Zimbabwe did it much differently, far more intelligent than we were in the West. And the way they did it, they put their city far away from the water courses, but they knew that then trading directly via the nearest river, but not directly alongside the river, they could take their trade out to the open sea. In doing so, they protected their site. They protected their site from the tsetse fly. They protected their site from disease. But we didn't learn from that. We suffered from the plague. This site was, these civilizations were not wiped out because of any plagues. We were decimated via the plague because our cities were vulnerable. As soon as somebody comes off a ship bearing the plague, the entire city is destroyed. Bristol, for example, Southampton, as soon as the plague hit those localities, the entire population was wiped out. This did not happen with the likes of Great Zimbabwe because these people were far enough from the water courses, but close enough to actually trade, but far enough to avert any catastrophic disasters associated with diseases. Do you know what I'm going to do? I didn't want to show you this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Because this is the type of stuff that was drummed into us in university. Then why did the city decline? Let's read this out. There are various explanations. The people had let their herds overgraze the land. Is that true? They had cut down all the trees. Is that true? There was a prolonged period of drought, as may happen in South Africa. Is that true? Let's take these apart. Overgrazing the land, well, there's lots of trees growing there today, and there's large herds of cattle grazing across the landscape even today. So we'll put a cross next to that. They cut down all the trees. Absolute nonsense. The same nonsense when we look at Easter Island. No, they didn't cut down all their trees because there's lots of trees growing there today. It may look like a barren outbacking landscape, but it's not. There are lots of trees there today. the work of I follow lots of stuff on YouTube, and there's a chap who I follow called Bonga Zozo. He's a Swahili-speaking chap from Great Britain, right? Or with British origins. He's well respected, and he takes us to places where there are lots of trees, lots of water courses. He repaints the landscape of Zimbabwe, and I've been able to understand it a lot more. So the trees were there, and the trees are there today. There were prolonged periods of drought. There was a prolonged period of drought when the Zulu took on the British Empire and defeated it at Islandwana, and that drought didn't affect them. They were able to thankfully wipe out the British army at Islandwana, showing that the Zulu were far more superior than the British army. And that's not fact either. A great drought did not destroy the great Zimbabwean civilization. Here's another point. But somehow none of these theories quite explain why. After 350 flourishing years, a community of perhaps 20,000 plus people should simply pack up and leave. And they just left. But they left to the northern plains, where there were different things going on, different factors. They took with them the farmers, the herders, the financiers, the miners, the craftspeople, the soldiers, the traders, the accountants, the court personnel, the kings, the leaders, and so on. The city did not slowly die. And the reason why the city did not slowly die is because when a city slowly dies, you demolish bits of building, you build it there, and you move this bit of stone over there. It looks like a right state, right? This is what we can similarly see. A good example of this is, for example, when we look at Caerleon, the Roman site of Caerleon. Even though Caerleon was basically abandoned after the Roman period, when the Normans got there, they bastardized it. They pulled the whole thing down and whatever, right? That's a sign of a site being reused. The site was never reused. It may have been used by a few farmers and whatever, but they respected it, right? They simply left. And I disagree with that statement. The archaeological evidence does not say. But we do know there were disruptive external forces at work. For example, we see the Portuguese interfering with trade. And when they start interfering with trade, the people of Great Zimbabwe have to move north, because there's one downside of having your ports far away from your city. One downside, you can't defend those ports. So what was happening is the Portuguese were taking trade away from the people of Great Zimbabwe. So they just moved to being the Matapa people of the north. They just moved northwards into northern Zimbabwe, northern Rhodesia. Certainly by this time, the Swahili traders were coming up the Zambezi to trade with the Shona directly. And the old trade route through Great Zimbabwe no longer used. So in other words, the people of Great Zimbabwe moved north. The trade links changed, the water links changed, and their understanding of how to use these waterways changed. At this time too, we see the beginning of another Shona state, the Shona people, building a place near Bulawayo, and we all know Bulawayo associated with Zimbabwe. In the following centuries, this became the center of another state. Into the 1600s. So one thing that can be said about the site of Hamai near Bulawayo is that the people of Great Zimbabwe moved into two directions. They moved north and they moved west to be involved in different types of technology and different types of innovation. Look at that there. I don't know, when I do these lectures before, I always get opinions coming towards me. And somebody said, I've had the following. The reason why the entrances are like this is that they're narrow at the bottom so they can stop fat people getting through. And I just thought, no. And then they basically said, well, there are entrances like this without any lintels and no drawbridges and no other defenses, because they didn't need to defend these sites against attacking people. And when you think about that, let's say yes. And that might be a feminist way of looking at this site. With a masculine way, We've always got to play with the phallus. We've always got to think of warfare. We've always got to defend things. We've also got to put them against us. But when you've got a female point of view with these sites, you actually start to think, well, why do you always need to fight? The reason why this culture is great, and this can be seen as a fact. When you're building great monuments like this, and you've got loads of time to build great monuments like this, and put your resources into building great monuments like this, you're not being attacked. You haven't got to use your workforce to fight other people. That is a fact. So warfare at this stage is not a major part of society. Shout out and say I'm wrong, and I'll just shoot you down. Let's just use another perspective. And I think another perspective is always useful, isn't it, Keith?
Certainly.
Can I just make a point? We mentioned about the Portuguese, but the Portuguese did not really know about Great Zimbabwe. They may have known about the people, but they didn't know about the location of Great Zimbabwe until after the 1450s. So the first incursions of the Spanish and the Portuguese in regards to empire is in regards to Africa, and the Portuguese in regards to this landscape and Mozambique. And oh God, you know, when you read some, I was reading something yesterday. It said that, yeah, well, I'll do that in a minute. What it was said in my university notes. It was said, for example, that that this site was created by a Portuguese priest after 1450, and it could be proven to be created by a Portuguese Christian priest, because before 1450 there were no records about the site, so therefore it was created in 1450 by the Portuguese, and that image stuck. That was an image that stayed for a very, very long time. Because it was a Portuguese ideal, the Portuguese wanted to do their damnedest to give legitimacy for them in Zimbabwe and Mozambique and so on, being the first Westerners to get there. The legitimacy is that the Portuguese are the only people that could have created something like this. Therefore, they've got a right to be in South Africa. And it was their justification. We now know that that's complete fantasy. This city was abandoned in 1450. And the first references were coming out at 1450 of this great culture. Because it was abandoned, no Westerner could believe that local people could have created this. When it was abandoned, it was obviously proof of the existence of the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon in the past. All those films from the 1930s give references with Tarzan and the apes to the likes of the Queen of Sheba. I used to watch them, and occasionally used to come across these sites, and it used to say these were the cities of the Queen of Sheba or King Solomon from the north. Yeah, that's what we used to be told, and that view was actually what they used to tell in school. They used to tell it in school in the 1970s, and you could have politicians who would argue that there's no right to local people having voting rights in Africa, because they didn't create anything of this. There was even thought that the people of South Africa weren't actually native to this landscape. In fact, the Portuguese were native to this landscape. All these stupid, pointless arguments. With great respect, this culture was created by the Shona people and was created by the ancestors of the descendants that are around the landscape today. And that has to be made clear. A little bit back more into this is that there were even sort of references is that with the Matapa state in the north, the Portuguese recognized that the Matapa people of the north, not the people of Great Zimbabwe, actually built, listen to this, built big and where the king always lives. His houses are of stone and clay and very large on one level. Within the kingdom, there are many many very large towns and many other villages. This is talking about the Matapa people of the north, but not talking about the people of Great Zimbabwe. If they had have extended that to the people of Great Zimbabwe, it may have changed people's understanding of the people of the south. But unfortunately, that's not what the politicians wanted people to understand and hear. But you do have a glimpse, in a way, of Great Zimbabwe without mentioning it. The Matapa people further in the north. And there was an image painted of a bustling, mercantile, metropolitan culture. But again, not of Great Zimbabwe. It's again talking about the Shona of the north. Now, when it came to invading, and not only in regards to the Portuguese, when the British started to invade in vast numbers in the 1870s, with the likes of Cecil Rhodes, and then Cecil Rhodes, it was not a picture that was to be painted of a culture that could ever create anything like this. Centuries old heritage of royal courts is not a picture that the likes of Cecil Rhodes or the later Rhodesian government of Ian Smith ever wanted anyone to see. It was hidden. It was destroyed. Records were dismissed. Gertrude Caton-Thompson and her work, she was a woman. What would she know? Of course, she's going to put a female bent on this. And so in the end, this is not so much a story of a city abandoned by its people, but of a people willfully excluded from their past. So in other words, this is a past of Zimbabwe that was denied the people of Zimbabwe. In 1980, when Zimbabwe became an independent state, some of its past was reclaimed. The new state took its name from the great Shona city of Great Zimbabwe and adopted for its flag and coat of arms an image of one of the city's ceremonial soapstone birds that would have been excavated by Gertrude Caton-Thompson in the late 1920s. These are small steps forward, but there's still a long way to go before the world sees the indigenous histories of the African continent in their true perspective and acknowledge their intrinsic cultural worth. Africa is not about Egypt. It's about a land full of cultures, and generations of people have been denied their own history. So what I'd like to do is that I would like to quickly show you a couple more images, and then we'll go on to the break. And I would like, I'm gonna mute everybody, and in the break, I want a quick chat with those at Karen's house. So basically, now we understand what we're looking at. Now we can see what we're looking at. Now we can get a perspective to what we're looking at. And this is almost portraying a projection of who they are. Do you know, when you do a lecture like this, and you've done it a few times this week, a few things sprung to mind. The word mutual respect, the word local people, the word humanity, the word of this evidence in front of us is a cause of power. And I understand that you're seeing the chevron stuff. Is that right on the image?
Sorry, the what, Dust?
What image are you showing?
The top image of the pattern on the wall.
That's right. The words abandoned city. Words such as this was not a city wiped out by a pandemic. Words like evidence hidden. Skill of the people who created it. All these things are actually mentioned. And there was one talk about the Phoenicians actually creating this site. Now, the Phoenicians would have had to have created this site about 3,000 years ago, when the Phoenicians were great in the Mediterranean. And also, if the Phoenicians constructed it, it was obviously Western civilization constructed it. That's all absolute nonsense. This is created by the native peoples of the land. So what I would like to, ask is from you two, are there any questions? And actually, I'd like some criticisms, actually. Whether they're going to be criticisms against what I've said, or whether they're going to be criticisms of my very pro-South African native view, I don't know. But Keith, what would you like to say?
I'll just make an observation, really. When I was working, I had to go down to Nigeria a lot and visit the government in Lagos, until one day they decided that they're going to move the whole of the administration to a new town which they're building called Abuja. And they just decided that for political reasons. So, the leadership said, okay, we don't like being in Lagos anymore, we're going to move. So I just wonder if that's another possible explanation for towns being abandoned and people moving. Same as they did with Brazil, with Brasilia.
Yeah, but exactly. And what we're not going to do is say that that is the reason, but what we are going to do, there's a similarity. You've mentioned Brasilia. I was actually, when I did geography in school, I could not work out why they simply created a new city at Brasilia in the middle of nowhere. I could not. But if you look at it, Brasilia, the city itself is far away from the sea, and ties in with that mindset that you're creating a new type of technology, a new type of core at Brasilia. That's a really good point. And now you've mentioned that about the Lagos situation. There's nothing wrong with that mindset. There's everything wrong with investing money into London when one day, if the water level rises just a few inches, the Thames barrier is going to be overrun. London's going to be flooded. We've got to start thinking about moving our cities inland and not keeping them by these great watercourses. We don't need to move stuff via watercourses anymore. That's not how civilization is, but we don't learn. But it's interesting that the Brazilians, in my knowledge, and you're talking about Lagos in your knowledge, Keith, it's interesting that they are more ahead of our thinking than we give them credit.
And the only question I was going to ask is, have they actually found any burials or anything like that around Zimbabwe?
The question exactly what was being asked on Monday. We don't. The problem is, if you look at the conditions for preservations of bones within that landscape, it's not amenable to that.
Right.
And that's going to be my cop-out question. Because I was asked that as well. But if you want to look, for example, the archaeological excavation evidence at Islandawana is that very few of the bones of any of the soldiers have actually survived. Not because they've been dug up or whatever, it's simply because of the soil condition are not amenable to, and that's only, that's 1879, so that's 140 odd years ago. So this is hundreds of years earlier. So that gives you an answer to the question. Right, Sue, for somebody that's never come across this civilization, and we've got the second half coming up, which is slightly different, but we're looking at Mapungubwe. What would you like to say?
Well, one of the things that I think that when Britain was very much into colonization and domination, that there was a lot of mileage in suppressing the notion that African communities had any worthwhile history or culture of value. And so, it's refreshing to have it presented with its integral value, because we know that it did. It's a little bit like reading African writers today and seeing the depth of their understanding.
And the other, there's lots to be said. What African politicians are saying now, and I don't know if this is going to sound racist, but if it does, I apologize. What lots of African politicians are saying is that why are our children going towards Europe, and why are they seeking their fortune in Europe when we've got so much here? Why are you leaving us? Why can't you stay in Africa? And I think by understanding their past, by reconnecting with the past that the people of Zimbabwe are doing and the people of South Africa are trying to do, I think that's the answer. And we need to look at their example, because we can, this is an important point. The Africans, the people of Africa and Asia and America are forced to learn Western history. They're forced to learn about Alexander the Great. They're forced to learn about the Roman Empire and ancient Greece, right? They're forced to learn about Egypt, which is very much a European country in lots of ways. We should now look outwards and look at these civilizations. Do you know what, right? I'm ashamed to say that I haven't done a single lecture about the Indian Peninsula. I haven't looked at the likes of Indochina. I've not looked at those areas, when in fact their civilization is as great and as impressive and influential as ours. But I've been frightened to do it, not because I am frightened, but because I've still got a mindset that struggles to go outside the box. This is why I've been doing this now, and this is why I've been doing Easter Island and the Amazon Basin and Pueblo Bonito. I wanted to do them, and it's good to expand. So what I'd like to do is stop screen sharing. Let's have a few questions. And Jane, thanks for joining us. Let's have everybody's mics unmuted. Jane. Right, okay. Unmute. Ask to unmute. Ask to unmute. And Goff. Joe, I mentioned you a few times, Goff. Have you actually been to South Africa, Zimbabwe? I reckon you have.
Yeah, yeah.
But you wouldn't have gone to any of these sites, I'm sure, because you'd been around the coast.
No, no.
Okay. So anything you'd like to say, Goff?
No, it's so far so good. Very interesting.
What about you, Ellen? No? Okay. Pam?
She's still muted, Ellen.
Oh, okay.
She's muted.
Yeah, well, she should unmute herself.
Right,
Yes.
yeah, you know the very big compound had circular buildings in it. Outside there were lots of large circular ruins. So what were they?
The houses of the vulgaris, the common people like you and me.
Right, okay.
Miniature enclosures, I said, miniature enclosures. Remember that you've got the sense of the vertical line from the base to the top. It's in a way that the curve of the walls is actually keeping them up. But that's not exactly true, but because you do actually have completely vertical towers that are also made of dry stone that have also stayed up. So, you know.
Yeah. No, outside the compound, in the land around it.
That's right. That's what I said. Outside, yeah, they were of the vulgaris.
Right. Okay.
Anything, Jane, quickly? No.
Just amazing, you know, those walls were just incredible, weren't they? Especially if they're dry stone walls.
Yes, exactly. They're completely. If you, the tallest dry stone walls that we could possibly have is if you wander around the Peak District, you have walls that are about 2 meters tall, and you've got little step things to go over. They're dry stone, but they take a lot of maintenance. But these are 10, 12, 13, whatever meters height. Go on, Ellen, quickly.
Sorry, it says somewhere in the writing that the stone was granite, and yet there were lichens growing on the wall itself, which makes me think it must be sort of limestone.
Yeah, basically it's on a granite. Lots of this is on a granite outcrop, but there's lots of sandstones to actually be used. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
But if they're going to be using granite for anything, they've got the tools to do it as well. The ancient Egyptians could do it. So what? That's the point. The ancient Egyptians could do it. So why can't these? Jim, Karen, Kathy, anything? Right, okay.
Well, this is Pam.
Go.
You might have said this recently, or I might have seen it from somewhere else, but civilizations, an example, 10 years is only a short time, but civilizations got to the point where they knew they'd be finished something, a project in 10 years, and about 2 years from the 10 years, they may have started thinking of achieving something else. So they've achieved everything they're going to in that 10 years, so they move on, and mankind needs to achieve. Did I hear that from you? Or
no,
somewhere?
Well, actually, I've said something similar to that, but you didn't get that from me. But that is actually a quite succinct statement. I completely agree with that.
Possibility, isn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with any of that. I wouldn't. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a break now, and I'm going to have a quick chat with those four at Karen. So I'm going to mute everybody else. Mute, mute, mute. Right, so you four are not happy with the email that's been sent out. Is that correct?
I haven't seen any email.
Right, okay, right. What we're going to do...
We are socially distancing here.
Right, okay, okay. I've muted you all now. Right, so if because of the feedback, if one of you could cut the mic on your computer, and I've unmuted you now. Right, okay, I will unmute Karen again. Okay, unmute. Oh, are you guys unmuting? One. So we did the first half, and I feel a bit relieved we've done the first half, because the first half is always the controversial bit when we're looking at the likes of cultures that I, as a Westerner, have been trying to understand, and I'm really still trying to understand it today. And there's a friend of mine who I've mentioned earlier on. He's called Bongo Zozo, and I'll be sharing this video to him afterwards. And I want to see what he thinks about his views, because he comes from this type of background and he speaks Swahili really well, and he does lots of videos. And I'll let you know what he thinks about the thoughts that we've given out today, which I think will be really important. So next we're going to be looking at Mapungubwe, which is the site that I've known about in different ways, being editor of Archaeology World Report, and we covered a piece on it, by the Limpopo River. And also, by the way, if you're seeing K2 on there, that's not K2, okay? This is another K2. So it gives you an idea where we are and what we have done to give you, to not confuse you all. And I've had the opportunity to change this several times this week. So when we think about Great Zimbabwe, we're talking about the dates. Start again. Great Zimbabwe has been established around 1100, and we're talking about the dates going all the way through to 1450. So that's Great Zimbabwe. The likes of the Matapa civilization is going roughly from the 1400s all the way through to, say, the 1600s. So that's the kingdom move north. You can see what's happening there. And then when we look at the likes of our friends, when we look at Mapungubwe, the dates associated with Mapungubwe are roughly, say, about 800 to probably around 1250. So we've got a bit of an overlap. So in regards to movement of people, the occupation center is building at Great Zimbabwe, and at one point the leaders at Mapungubwe probably said, right, we're just going to move to Great Zimbabwe at some point as things are being developed. So what we're going to do, we're going to leave that bit there. It's nice to put those dates up so you know where you're going. Now this is key to where I wanted to be today. And I need to get this right. So that chap on the right is typically Zimbabwean features. On the other side of the glass, there is the golden rhinoceros. Now the golden rhinoceros is the size of a three-quarter length shoebox, standard shoebox. It was originally a wooden rhinoceros, and what they did was they got golden nuggets. They hammered them out, then they pinned these, I think with copper pins, onto the wooden base, and it would have really looked really interesting. So all that's made of little individual golden nuggets. They did have the technology to smelt gold, but in regards to this art, it's a specific type of art, so we're not going to question it. Now, that man shown, if he thought that that wasn't his culture, that artifact would have ended up in the West, or it would have ended up being melted down. That's as simple as that. We're not going to, that guy would not respect that object. But those eyes are looking at that and they're really respecting that object. That's really important because those two have got a connection, because that is his history. There's nothing about the Portuguese here. There's nothing about influence from the West. This is an independent civilization with no influence from the Queen of Sheba, Egypt, or anything else. Their wealth is going outside the country, and wealth from other countries are coming in, and it's going within the civilization, but it's not influencing the civilization. So these are very powerful people, and they've got gold to spare, which is a rather interesting point. Not as much gold to spare as the Inca. They had trade routes, exporting gold, bringing in those foreign goods. The Inca kept most of their gold within their land, and its meaning changed. I think I've got that right. What we're talking about is I'm occupying a little more on the text that I've got in front of me, rather than structural evidence, and more onto the gold as the end and the backdrop to this lecture. So reading my notes in front of me, we've got another article to illustrate this. Mapungubwe, located in the very north of South Africa, in South Africa, the country, just below the Limpopo River, an Iron Age settlement, a settlement that had access to iron. When you use the word Iron Age, it conjures up that these people are spear wielding backwards and they've got a few iron spears, which is completely wrong. So there are people using iron, and they're a very important state. And Mapungubwe itself means stone monuments. Rather than Zimbabwe stone houses, stone monuments. And it's based on this little, well, when I say little, it's not an exhausted site. The site at Mapungubwe is over an area of no more than 15 acres, with that big rock as well. And this site compared to Great Zimbabwe is tiny. It's Great Zimbabwe is 200 acres in area. This is 15, so it's quite small in regards to that. But we've got lots of really interesting archaeological data. At the beginning of the lecture, you saw a couple of site plans from 1937. With this site, like Great Zimbabwe later, you've got copper and ivory, which permitted long distance trade and brought gold and other exotic goods to the ruling elite, and as well as using it as a trade good for countries far afield. This site went into decline due to varying reasons. And maybe it went into decline because the trade links and trade movements moved. That is, the rock itself is known as the Mapungubwe Plateau. Without any contemporary written records, a somewhat incomplete history of the communities living in this area must be pieced together from archaeological finds only. Alas, we don't have the same level of racism associated with the site of Great Zimbabwe. Building here is slightly different. The structures are not as tall as the ones at Great Zimbabwe, and they're using smaller stone. Lots of the more local sandstones rather than the some of the local sands and granites associated with Great Zimbabwe. So that's a difference. But this is before the Great Zimbabwe area of civilization. There is also very little evidence for the existence of any state apparatus beyond the obvious wealth of the capital, which would suggest a centralized authority which monopolized trade wealth and could command labor to build large stone structures. But this is nevertheless hearsay. This is on top of the plateau that we've so described. If you want to quote and unquote this, the king and his court dwelt in a stone enclosure composed of stone walls and housing built on the highest level of the community's territory, overlooking the landscape. We've got a bit of a vague image coming up as well. The kingdom of Mapungubwe was formed by Bantu-speaking peoples of the Shona. The area controlled by the rulers of Mapungubwe has its heart a large sandstone plateau, rather again than the volcanic plateau that Great Zimbabwe is constructed across and all the other worlds constructed therein. It's easily defended due to its inaccessibility. Now, we've got a difference in word use. Great Zimbabwe, we never mentioned defense once. With this, we're using the word defense. Now, is it that word defense that we go for? As with other kingdoms in the region of South Africa, the landscape of South Africa rather than the country, agriculture, especially cattle herding and the growing of sorghum and cowpeas, brought plenty of food and surplus that could be traded for needed goods. Of course, an extensive trade network running all the way back to the 800s. So cattle herding is really important. Projecting the wealth and power of this community, this civilized world. Now, cattle rearing is important today in Africa as it was in the past. So cattle rearing is useful for landscape management because it adds the suitable fecal matter to the ground to give life to various plant growth. So it's got some benefits. So the archaeological data that we see at Mapungubwe, as we see the archaeological data back to the 1930s, sees a marked increase in the number of domestic cattle in the area, as well as cotton cultivation and weaving, as indicated by abundant finds of spindle whorls. Now, I need to stop there just a second. This site is dedicated to 800 years AD CE. And the archaeologists excavating there knew that this site had been associated with the descendants of the people around that landscape, but it was still dismissed. This was a site excavated by male archaeologists. Can you see the word used, defended, with this site being excavated by male archaeologists in the 1930s to the site being excavated in the 1920s with Great Zimbabwe, non-defensive, but you've got these massive, huge walls. So you can see that there, there's a difference in use of wording. The plateau that this is built on is 30 meters high, overlooks the landscape. But the plateau is only 100 meters in length, so it's not an exhaustive plateau. It sounds quite small to me, and it looks much bigger in the illustration, but it's still an important complex surrounded by stonework, and within the landscape as well that this overlooks. There's some sense in the way of post holes and some kind of defense. There's grindstones and all the types of things you would associate with this type of civilization. Now, I'm going to bring in the article now because there's a wonderful map that I want to show you. So I'm going to bring in this, and absolutely wonderful. And it's not in the British Museum. It's actually in Africa. Yes. If I'm right in thinking this is in Pretoria, but it probably moves around a little bit. But this is in Africa. It's not in the British Museum. This, I'm sure Cecil Rhodes tried to get it to the British Museum, but it didn't get there. So I think that's an interesting point. I don't know what I'm saying there, or what I'm trying to indicate. So here we go, Mapungubwe. We're going to change the screen share. So we're going to have a new share. And you should be seeing the wording, Jane, Mapungubwe, am I correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Who asked you, Keith?
I give my contributions free.
There's the rock. Oh, Jane pays me for a contribution. Now, look at this here. I don't know if I can do any better, so I'm going to click onto this. Map of ancient and medieval Sahara African states. So look at this here. Now, the kingdom of Kush is up there. Okay, the yellow splodge. Another kingdom that we're aware of is the kingdom of Aksum in Ethiopia. from the 800s.
Face, you've been puddling, haven't you?
What? Have you got your dog in the background? Hang on a minute. I tell you what, I got Sue, can you cut your mic, please? I don't know what the puddling meant. That was really strange. Right, so back to this. We've mentioned the kingdom of Aksum before, Ethiopia. And all these other kingdoms you may not have heard of, except for the kingdom of Benin. Now, the kingdom of Benin is interesting because it was still an independent kingdom into the 1800s until the Western world invaded it and nicked all its bronzes, the Benin bronzes. There's a lot of the Benin bronzes in the British Museum. And you can see all along the eastern coast, all these other kingdoms, and the Abyssinian Ethiopian kingdom that we're aware of. The kingdom of Alodia, which is one that you would never come across. Look at some of the ones in the center as well. We got Hussaland in the center. The kingdom of Kanem, Bonu Empire, all these sort of little empires, but substantial empires, the Ghanaian Empire on the western coast, the Songhai Empire, all these ones that you'd never come across. The Mali one's one that you may have come across. Kingdom of Congo with a K. Then the bloody Belgians take her over. Kingdom of Lubar and the Swahili coast on the east coast. But what we do have here is everything I've been saying. Mapungubwe that we're looking at now, Great Zimbabwe, and the Matapa kingdom there. Slight differences from the dates that I've used, but that's what we've got. We've got a movement, and obviously people moving from the south as well over a period of time. So I'm going to keep this with us for a moment, and then we'll go off it. So this is what we've got: major kingdoms. There's lots of them, and what I need to do, I need to go back, clear my drawings, and so. What we're talking about with the likes of Mapungubwe is obviously the plateau itself. And then within that landscape, you've got a territory of under 15 acres with the sort of hilltop and so on with that. You've got people living in mud and thatched houses within that landscape below. But when you get to the sense of Mapungubwe, when you get to the likes of Great Zimbabwe later, by the 1350s, people are living in stone miniatures of the Great Enclosure, rather than everything being mud hut and thatch buildings, but mud huts and thatch buildings still being used, but not without the walls around them. So Mapungubwe, we're talking about a population of 5,000, Great Zimbabwe, 2,000. And listen to what this says. The king was buried along with predecessors at the top of the hill site in a demarcated area away from the dwellings, while commoners were buried in the surrounding valley level. So there you go. That's happening. That's what's happening to some of the bodies. You asked about Great Zimbabwe. This is what's happened at Mapungubwe. A wooden staircase connected the two levels, the sockets of the steps being clearly visible in the sandstone cliff face. So you got the higher town for the elite and the lower town for the vulgaris like me and Sue. There are some grander residences dotted around the outskirts of the lower level town, and these probably belong to male relatives of the king, but lots of other people. It is known that in Bantu society, such males, serious competitors for the king's position, were not permitted to live directly within the community. And again, our beautiful rhinoceros actually is a better image than the one I'm actually showing on the screen, the other screen. So what we do have, we have lots of other communities across the hilltops of Mapungubwe. And the plateau itself goes on for about, not the plateau, the hilltop itself and the various sites go on for an area of 60 odd miles. So there are lots of other residences. Did this one locality act as a core residence of the Mapungubwe territory, or the little confederations? So what a few interesting things about the Mapungubwe landscape is that the Mapungubwe plateau has a very high number of carnivore animal remains and ivory splinters, suggesting that animal hides and ivory elephant tusks were accumulated probably for trade with coastal areas down the Limpopo River. The presence of glass beads tell us that trade at the site came all the way from Drumbeat, India. So they had trade with India 800 years AD. So that's great. We've also got trade with China again, similar vessels that we see with Great Zimbabwe again. We also have trade with other states, the Swahili states further up north along the coast, India and Arabia. So there would have been some access to trade from Europe as well. But again, there's no knowledge of this state with the people of Europe. It's just those things that are passed on. Mapungubwe would have also benefited from copper and gold trade from the surrounding landscape, as we later on see with the likes of Great Zimbabwe. We're going to keep this image on here a minute because it's better than the one I've got, actually. We also see that there's an extensive creation of various types of pottery. We see certain types of pottery, the more complicated types of pottery for the aristocracy, and the lower types of pottery for the lesser well-to-do. We've got lots of representations in their art in regards to figurines of cattle, sheep, goats, and small figurines of humans as well. And what we do obviously see is these wonderful golden artifacts, and lots associated with gold and ivory. Now, looking at this little beast in front of us, a great particular type of decoration only found elsewhere at Great Zimbabwe. So in other words, the only time that we've actually seen wood with bits of pre-beaten gold and then hammered on is actually from this site in Great Zimbabwe, was to beat gold into small rectangular sheets, which were then decorated with geometric patterns made by incision and used to cover wooden objects like this one in front of us. The wood hasn't survived, usually small tacks, also made of gold, some made of copper. So golden tacks. I can't get that concept. So the wood must have been really soft. One such covered object, which we're going to go on to. So if we move down the screen, so we will come back to the rhinoceros just briefly. So look at this here. Now, this is the type of stuff that you might sort of see in bronze in a British context from the Bronze Age. But these are wonderful objects. So what you would see is these are associated with some kind of scepter or something of high office, or then again something else. While additional evidence of local gold working is a rhinoceros, which we've seen, made from small hammered sheets, fragments of gold bangles, and thousands and thousands of golden beads like this one. So these have clearly been smelted, but these golden beads here could naturally be shaped out with little golden nuggets. These objects were found at burial site, the burial site on the top of the plateau that we've already mentioned, and could be seen as being forms of currency as well, golden currency. So if we want to give this, if we want to compare with the likes of Europe, gold would be a very scarce thing to see at this time in Europe. But here, gold is rife. Now, we've really answered what happened to these people. Local resources running out, trade routes moving north, so they simply moved up to Great Zimbabwe, and then Great Zimbabwe moved up to the Matapa Kingdom in turn. And I know I've said some of the following, and Kathy can say I'm repeating myself. Do you know, I love mentioning the name Kathy. I've got to put up with her for 3 days in September. And don't worry, Kathy, when we're out walking, you don't have to wear a face mask. It's only on the minibus. When Europeans discovered the ruins of Mapungubwe in the 1800s, just as with those at Great Zimbabwe, initially they did not believe that what they found at Mapungubwe could have ever been constructed by black Africans. But then we've got the excavations in the 1930s that challenges this view from the 1800s. But I'm sure the archaeologists were told, right, guys, if you make public that you feel these were constructed by local people, you'll never work in archaeology again. And do you know what? there were archaeologists in the 1970s working for the South African government. And one of them made public that he believed that Great Zimbabwe and Mapungubwe were actually constructed by the native peoples of Africa. He never worked in archaeology again. Nobody would accept him in any of the universities. It was only for another 20 years that he'd have to wait that his views would be accepted. And this was a white archaeologist. Theories abound to somehow explain their presence and confirm racist European beliefs, such as attributing to the ancient Egypts or Phoenicians. Yes, Great Zimbabwe would have to have been made by the Egyptians or the Phoenicians. Archaeology, however, has since proved both sites were indeed built by indigenous people with a proud history. Many of the artifacts from Mapungubwe can be seen at the University of Pretoria Museums, South Africa, while the site itself is protected as part of the Mapungubwe National Park scheme. So what we've got left now is a few images. But again, I love this image, and it's different. It's and I said this on Monday, and I haven't said this now, but I've not given a single lecture recently, other than the Inca, where I've actually mentioned the word gold. I don't know how I've got away with it, but up until now, I've done pretty good. So, so what I'd like to do now is show you the images. We won't be going on as late as usual today. So we'll go back to, are you seeing the golden rhinoceros?
No.
Yes.
I don't care what Jane says.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Jane's too keen. And look at that there.
I can see it now.
What is that?
Moo.
You got the sound right. You said moo.
Yeah, an ox.
Oh, an ox or a buffalo of some description.
Yeah, some kind of cattle.
Yes.
Canoe.
A moo. Oh, shut up.
A canoe.
A canoe.
A canoe?
I'm a canoe.
Is that what it's called?
A canoe is a wildebeest.
Yeah.
No, it's ears low down on its head. So it's got to be...
Got a hunchback.
So it's called a canoe.
Haven't we all?
There's a song. I'm a canoe. I'm a
all
canoe.
Right, let's move on. Anyway, this was obviously shaped. You four are terrible today. This is obviously shaped on a wooden frame, but it's all tacked on. And again, look at more. That is all little bits of gold and some kind of saper-looking object, and a golden bowl and a wonderful rhinoceros. And back to the Mapungubwe site, back on the top of the hill, the plateau, what you can clearly see is that the stonework is very different from Great Zimbabwe. Lots of random sandstone, creating towers that would have been impressive, but not as great as the ones at Great Zimbabwe, simply because by using the smaller stones, it's not given the integrity that you would see with the larger blocks that you can see at the Great Enclosure at Great Zimbabwe. But this is a bit of a reconstruction. So what they have done, they've got a wonderful museum on site. And they've done a reconstruction of one of the towers and a little bit of a wall there. That this does look very different from Great Zimbabwe. We can see how this would have evolved into the sites at Great Zimbabwe. A really sort of squat, conical type tower, not as tall as the ones at the other site, but they've done nice little reconstructions. And again, they've got that sense of connection. This is that little illustration I mentioned earlier on, where you've got this sort of palisaded stone sort of structures on the plateau, and you've got the other little buildings in the valley, and you've got some other sort of enclosures. And one thing that could be said, if you squint your eye and think, right, if you built these out of stone and add some other stone buildings and put some roundhouses in them, this could look like Great Zimbabwe, but naturally very different from this image. Again, you can imagine this being excavated in the 1930s. The archaeologists saying, wow, this is built by the Shona people, the Bantu speaking peoples of that region. And then other archaeologists saying, nope, this is built by the Portuguese. Gotta be. But we now know that this is built by the indigenous people of South Africa. And actually what we actually have done is actually come to the end much earlier today. But they are really starting to connect. And I made a statement earlier on that there's a long way to go before you know, more is understood and more is associated and more connection is made with these people. But I think a good start has been made. And I think what we need to be doing is teaching in the Western world, when we look at ancient Egypt, go to these other civilizations, go to the likes of Axum in Egypt, Ethiopia, go to the Mali, go to the Benin people and look at their plight with the bronzes and all these other things. So much can be learned. And at that point, I'm going to call it a day. Are there any questions from Gough?
No, it's very enlightening, because my impression of the people of Africa is wandering tribesmen. So I was obviously wrong.
And yes, I can understand that. Up until the 1800s, there were still these kingdoms in existence, but when you use the word wandering tribesman, I think there's nothing wrong with that explanation of civilization. It's just that they were different at one stage, and they will be different again. It's the way things evolve, and with that example with Brasilia and so on, where things move and change, I think that was a useful thing earlier on. Right, Ellen?
Only something slightly different. You called it Benin on the southern part of the east of Africa.
Western,
yeah. Well, there's a thing called a bly, which is a huge bay. And when I was a kid, I learned a poem that said, the bly of Benin, one comes out where three went in. Because all the traders that used to go there, they were supposed to have got lots of diseases they picked up and died. So for every 3 people that actually went in, only one ever came out.
or they were eaten.
Possibly, yes.
No, that's really, I shouldn't have said that. It's really derogatory. And
No, it wasn't. There's all sorts of reasons for death. But yeah. But it was a very well-known trading port. So I know it's the other side of Africa. But yeah, I think trade has always been an important thing all around the coasts, isn't it?
The Benin people are a very powerful civilization. They're very, very well respected as traders. And very much that they held their own against the Portuguese and the Spanish for such a long time. It was when the people of Benin were actually overrun by the great military that they ceased to be an independent entity. And the only independent entity in the whole of Africa was Ethiopia, up until the fact that they were overrun by the Italians in the 1930s. The Ethiopian did actually defeat the Italians at the Battle of Adawa, and that's seen as one of the great victories over the West by all African nations, and so right so. Jane, anything you'd like to say?
Just very interesting, because we all think, don't we, of Africa, people in Africa as being advantaged, and you know, and clearly at one time they were a great civilization, but also that world economists are now saying that we should be looking to Africa for the future economy, because it's growing so incredibly in world economic, and there are so many people in Africa that you know, in a way they're going to be there's going to be the most people in the world in Africa. So perhaps they'll be great again.
And you're right. And the other thing as well is images of Africa have to change. You know, when we used to watch television, we used to have those cannibals being portrayed with Tarzan and the apes and all the rest of it. And I think those images have stayed with us from when we were children. And those images have to now be of these great cities that we now know exist. What we'll do, we'll keep the questions short. Pam? And Sue, Keith, anything?
Just a short one then. On the map, it said kingdoms and empires. What's the difference, please?
A kingdom is run by a natural king, and an empire is somebody. If you compare it, if the best analogy is when you look at the Roman Empire, Julius Caesar didn't want to be a king. He was a dictator. They wanted to make Julius Caesar a king. So when Julius Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC, within 10 years, the Roman Empire became an empire ruled by an emperor that as a sole rulership advised by the Senate. That's how it's meant to work. Kingdoms almost as if have absolute rule. An empire seems to rule by some kind of democracy. A kingdom doesn't.
Okay, thanks.
But unfortunately, in lots of ways, the Roman Empire, what would happen is the Roman Emperor would say, this is what I'm doing. You all agree? That's good. Thanks for your vote of confidence. Anything, Keith?
No, did you get my envelope? I sent through a big lot of articles of the week. Obviously, hadn't arrived yet.
I'm just going to check the door. Hang on.
It's all right.
It's not arrived yet. It's not arrived yet, so I'll read them out next week.
Yeah, I sent it first class as well, the little what's-its.
What do you expect? It's the valleys. Thank you. Anyway, thank you very much for doing that in advance. Next week, I know there's a few people still want to speak, those four, and I just want to speak to Ellen and Goff at the end. I will mention that next week we're doing Rome from a British context, the fall of the Roman Empire in Britain. So that'll be all to do with Carlisle still having a water fountain flowing in 500 years of AD and all the rest of it. So that's what we'll be doing next week. Obviously, those that will be joining us tomorrow on YouTube's tomorrow will actually be taking place at 5 o'clock and not 1. Also, the other thing as well is I'd like to mention we're doing Saturday and next Wednesday, and obviously the forum. I would like to ask now if, here we go, do sort out your mics your end. Kathy and Karen, quickly. Kathy and Karen, go.
No, nothing to say.
Okay, so what I'll do is so basically Jim and Chris, anything you'd like to say?
Hello.
That's a long.
No.
Karen?
No, nothing there. Okay, and so I'm going to give the last word again to Sue. Sue, have you learned something today?
Yes, I have, because I didn't know anything about those buildings and history. I mean, I've got a great sort of interest in Africa because I read a lot of African writers. And, you know, if anybody hasn't yet discovered Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, you know, can I highly recommend her? She's a wonderful writer, and I think she really is able to encapsulate without sort of being on a platform about sort of how African people are bigger than we have given them credit for.
And hurrah on that one, I completely agree. So if there's no more questions today, naturally, I'm not seeing any of you tomorrow, which is a bit of a shame. I want a quick chat with Ellen and Goff. I'm going to call that a day now. I really appreciate your support always. And I'm always here for you to speak to if you need to speak about anything. Thanks for that, Sue. Good to see you back. Pam, Jane, Keith, Karen, Jim, Kathy, Chris, Goff, and Ellen. I'll see you guys next week. Cheers, guys. Give everyone a wave. And Ellen and Goff.
Okay, bye-bye, Daddy. Bye-bye, Daddy.
Son.
Missing you already.
I know. But don't go. I'll get your letter tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. He's a strange one, isn't he? I've got to be honest with you, Keith.
He's lovely.
He's lovely. Right. First things first, Ellen. I'll deal with you quickly. What I need is the area that you need covered.
All right. It's only about 3 or 4 square meters.
I can't have 3 or 4 square meters. I need precise measurements.
Oh, I see. Right.
Because what we've got a load of these slabs at the allotment, right? Which nothing's happening with them. So, and they are sandstone. So I need the area because I need to lay them out. So I'm not gonna do anything. You need to get the precise area because if
there's 2 areas of 5 foot by 4 foot.
5 foot by
5 by 4.
2 areas.
And then there's one area of 6 foot by the narrow width of one slab.
Which is 1 foot.
Well, it's just going to be one slab all the way along for a 6 foot area.
Is any of this curbed?
No.
Oh, right. So it doesn't matter if it overlaps. Yeah, I will.
No.
I will look at that. And right. Yeah, we'll sort that out.
Okay, thanks very much.
And yeah, we'll sort that out. Just let me get into it, and I'll let you know.
All right. Thanks, Carl. Right.
Thank you, Ellen. Bye.
Back off.
See you, Ellen. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye, Alan.
Love to Michelle.
I will. I've written it down. Right. Can you remember we had a conversation about 4 months ago, Goff? It was something along the lines of whatever happens, you'll keep your membership going until January. I have now got the problem that no matter how much we try to get people out and about, they just don't want to do anything. They're just quite happy doing this. You know, we last Sunday, right? I got to be honest with you. Last Sunday, we've had money to pay for new books for you guys to read. I'm not having a go at you. I'm having there's 20 people. Well, we did have 20. We've gone down to 16. And we bought all these books. And last week, we had 2 people coming along from Llantwit Major, and the money's been paid for by voluntary services. Nobody wants to come out and meet and get these books. I give everybody an opportunity to have a walk or something tomorrow. Nobody's interested. And the problem is with the whole situation, with less and less people wanting to go out, the price of us hiring a hall goes up and up and up. And I don't know what to say. I'm in the situation where people don't want to actually. They're quite happy doing this. I just wanted your point of view.
Well, I understand where you and your organisation's coming from. That you want to enlighten us and give us all the opportunities we can to, if we so choose to take full advantage of what you're giving. Personally, I'm happy with the package I've got, but I'm not, as you know, I don't go away with you, and I don't go on the ghost walks because I quite like the sessions in the morning.
Right.
Now I don't think we're going to get back to that for a while, to be honest with you.
Well,
so
yeah,
I think what you're doing for me is okay.
Okay.
I'd love to get back to the town hall, but I don't think we'll be doing that for some time.
When you think sometime, how long are you thinking?
Oh, town hall, the regulations will change, won't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, until you're going to get 30 people who want to pay £5 a session and go in the hall, in a bigger hall. I don't know whether that'll happen in Llantwit Major, to be honest.
Well, unfortunately, we could, if this pandemic hadn't have happened, right, we could have got to 30. But to be honest with you, spending the next 3 or 4 years to build up to that point it would be a lot of effort. You know, at the beginning of the year, we were looking at 20 people. And the people that continued with us, 17, 18 people who actually continued with us. We lost 5 or 6 people before that. You know, we've lost a few people now. One they've got no income at all. One has died. I'll mention Lynn. She's not like this format, and I don't think she'll mind me saying that.
No, I've spoken about that. I did speak to her and ask her why she didn't come, and she said she just doesn't like the format. And obviously Alan doesn't know. He's not that enthused about it.
But there is one. Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
But what can you do?
There's nothing I can do.
You can't do any more than you're doing.
I know, but sometimes
you can. You have to look. You have to see next year. I think have another look at the venue and see what you can do.
Yeah.
but otherwise, you've only got to continue with what you're doing, and no one's complaining, are they? It's just that
they're not. We're getting people, as we heard today. Terry's not going to continue.
I've had people like Catherine and Eleanor come, and they would normally wouldn't have dreamt of coming along to the town hall, but they're quite prepared to sit in front of their Zoom screen for a couple of sessions, and my kids as well.
Yeah.
So it's. But personally, I'm quite happy with back. I'll stick with Archaeology Cymru. I'll renew my membership next February.
Thank you.
So it's I'll support you for the things. I'll be selfish and say I like the Wednesday nights. It's quite good. I love the Thursday morning sessions. It suits me, so I haven't got a problem with it. But I'd love to, like you, I'd love to go back to, the face-to-face thing. It's much better. It's much better that way. You're better when you're in front of a crowd of people, not in front of a camera, I think.
But unfortunately, the problem is what we're hearing. I won't keep you too long now, but what we're hearing from like Terry and a few other people in our class is that they want us to go back, and then we're thinking, well, by you leaving us, we got less people, and it's really causing us that problem. But then again, I'm going to have to accept. I'm accepting it, and that's the way. And I spoke to Alan, right? I spoke to Alan on the phone, and I said, "Look, Alan," I said, "Look," and hopefully Alan won't mind me saying this, but I said to Alan, I said, "Look, do you want to come on the walk on Friday?" He said, "No, definitely not. I'm not doing anything like that." Okay, I said, "Okay." I said, "So all we've got to offer you are the notes and the post." And he said, "I'm perfectly happy with that." And he's going away with us to Cornwall. So he's perfectly happy with the notes. He's perfectly happy with the Cornwall thing. And he meets up with Rosamund, who does the portable library. If that's what he wants, then everyone's a winner.
Yeah, well, no, like I say, you can't do any more than you're doing. Things will probably go back to where they were, I would think, but not for a while yet.
No, exactly.
Certainly not till they've got a thingy. What's it called? Injection.
Vaccine. Yeah. Well, we won't see Alan in the room unless we got a vaccine. End of. That's it.
Yeah.
So, okay then. On that note, Goff, I look forward to seeing you.
I wouldn't be happy going back to the South Hall.
Say that again.
I would. I don't want to sit too close to people. I don't go. I'm still weary myself.
No.
I get it.
Yeah, you can forget that room.
I just did want to say that little door you opened last week with the Romans in Brazil, I found extremely interesting, and I think Catherine Ramsey sent you an article that she picked up about that. So I think it might be worth thinking about doing a little session on that maybe sometime.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I appreciate everything that people send me. So do you know what? On the Wednesday evening, right? I'm enjoying what we're doing on the Wednesday evening, but it would be good to go outside the box on Wednesday evenings as of September.
Well, you're in the seat. You're in the driving seat, aren't you?
So I'm having questions like this. Let's do a little bit more of this, and the other stuff. So cool.
Be flexible.
Exactly.
As Michelle tells you many times.
Right, okay, then on that note, leave Gillian out of this, and I will speak to you soon.
Ta-da!
Thanks for your time, Goff. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.